The Wyoming wind didn't just blow, it scoured. It took the topsoil, the moisture, and eventually, the hope. Susanna Gentry stood in the center of the vast, indifferent basin, watching the dust cloud on the horizon dissipate. That cloud was her life, her husband, and the wagon train she had traveled 2,000 miles with, vanishing into the shimmering heat. There was no note, no supplies, just a singular, terrifying silence that screamed louder than any gunshot. She didn't know it yet, but the man riding toward her wasn't coming to save her soul. He was coming to collect a debt, and he was the most dangerous thing on the Bozeman Trail. The silence was a physical weight. It pressed against Susanna's eardrums, heavier than the woolen dress that was suffocating her in the mid-July heat. 3 hours ago, Arthur had told her to wait. Just a wheel rim, Arthur had said, wiping grease onto his trousers. His eyes, usually shifty and pale like a winter sky, had been uncharacteristically steady. The axle is cracking. I can't risk the wagon tipping with you in it, Sue. You wait here by the rock formation. I'll take the wagon up the ridge to the blacksmith wagon, get it set, and come back for you with the horse. It made sense. It was logical. The wagon train was moving slowly, navigating the treacherous ruts of the Powder River Basin, but the sun had moved past its zenith. The shadows of the scrub brush were stretching like skeletal fingers across the cracked earth, and the dust cloud, the massive, choking sign of 50 wagons moving west, was gone. Susanna turned in a slow circle. To her left, the jagged teeth of the Bighorn Mountains loomed, indifferent and majestic. To her right, endless sagebrush. At her feet sat her small vanity case, the only thing Arthur had set down beside her. She knelt, her hands trembling as she undid the brass latch. Inside was not water. It was not food. It was a mirror, a comb, and a single sheet of paper folded into a sharp square. She unfolded it. The handwriting was jagged, rushed. Susanna, the road is too hard. The oxen are dying. I have a chance to buy a seat on the stagecoach from Fort Fetterman if I sell the wagon and the stock. 1 ticket. You were always stronger than me. Go back to the fort. Don't follow. She stared at the paper. The words didn't register as language, but as blows. 1 ticket. Arthur Gentry, the man she had married in a damp church in Ohio 3 years ago, the man she had nursed through typhoid in Nebraska, had not just left her. He had discarded her like a lame horse. He had left her 10 miles from the nearest water, in territory controlled by the Sioux, with nothing but a vanity case. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in her chest. She began to run. She ran toward the fading tracks of the wagons. Her boots, ill-suited for the rough terrain, slipped on loose shale. She screamed his name, but the wind snatched the sound from her throat and scattered it across the plains. Arthur! Come back. She ran until her lungs burned like coals. She ran until her hem tore on a cactus and her hair came loose from its pins. She ran until she fell, the gravel tearing the skin of her palms. She lay there, face pressed against the dirt, waiting for the sound of hooves, waiting for the joke to end. Arthur was cruel, yes. He was selfish. But he wasn't a murderer. But as the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in violent shades of bruised purple and blood orange, the truth settled over her. He was a murderer. Leaving a woman alone in the Wyoming territory was a death sentence, slow and agonizing. She sat up, wiping grit from her tear-stained face. She looked at the darkening horizon. I will not die here, she whispered, the sound raspy. I will not give you the satisfaction, Arthur Gentry. She stood up. Her legs shook. She began to walk, not chasing the wagons anymore, but heading south, toward where she thought the river might be. She walked through the twilight, the coyotes beginning their yipping chorus in the distance. Night fell like a heavy curtain. The temperature plummeted. Susanna found a depression in the earth near a cluster of boulders and curled into a ball, shivering violently. She had no fire, no weapon. Sleep was impossible. Every rustle of dry grass sounded like a predator. She closed her eyes and saw Arthur's face, not the man she married, but the stranger who had looked her in the eye and lied about a wheel rim. By the time the gray light of dawn bled into the sky, Susanna was barely conscious. Thirst was a swollen agony in her throat. She stood, stumbling, and then she saw it. On the ridge to the east, silhouetted against the rising sun, was a rider. He sat motionless on a massive bay horse. He wasn't moving away. He was watching her. Hope surged, frantic and painful. She waved her arms, her voice a croak. "Help! Over here!" The rider didn't wave back. He didn't spur his horse into a gallop. He simply nudged the animal with a possessor 7, and the horse began to pick its way down the slope with a slow, deliberate grace. As he got closer, the details of him sharpened. He was not a settler. He wore no denim overalls or sodbuster hat. He was dressed in dark canvas and leather, dust-coated but well-oiled. A low-slung gun belt hugged his hips. His hat was pulled low, shadowing his face, but she could see the stubble on a jaw that looked as if it had been chiseled from granite. He stopped the horse 10 feet from her. The animal snorted, tossing its head. Susanna stumbled toward him, reaching for the stirrup. "Water. Please. My husband. The wagons." The man didn't move to help her. He looked down, his eyes the color of charred wood, assessing her with a terrifying lack of sympathy. He looked at her torn dress, her bleeding hands, her sun-scorched face. "Arthur Gentry," the man said. His voice was a low rumble, like distant thunder. "That your husband?" Susanna froze. She looked up, shielding her eyes. Yes, Arthur. Do you know him?" The man shifted in the saddle. The leather creaked. In a manner of speaking, he reached behind him and unhooked a canteen. He tossed it to her. Susanna fumbled, catching it against her chest. She uncorked it and drank greedily, water spilling down her chin, soaking the bodice of her dress. "Slow down," he ordered, "or you'll heave it right back up." She lowered the canteen, gasping. "Thank you. Oh, thank you. You have to take me to him. There was an accident. He got separated." The cowboy leaned forward, resting his forearms on the saddle horn. A cynical smile touched the corner of his mouth. "Separated? Is that what he called it?" "I saw the tracks, ma'am. Wagon didn't stop for miles. He dumped you." The blunt cruelty of the words made her flinch. "You don't know what happened. I know a man running a light load when I see one," he said. "I've been tracking Gentry since Nebraska. He's got a head start, but he's heavy with the wagon. I'll catch him by sundown tomorrow." "You're a friend of his?" Susanna asked, though the cold knot in her stomach told her otherwise. "No," the man said. He adjusted his hat. "I'm Wyatt Coleman." The name meant nothing to her, but the way he said it suggested it should. "Mr. Coleman, please. I have no horse. I can't stay here." Wyatt Coleman looked at the horizon, then back at her. He seemed to be weighing the value of her life against the inconvenience of saving it. He looked at the Winchester rifle scabbarded on his saddle, then at the empty expanse behind her. "He left you to die," Wyatt said flatly. "That makes you baggage he didn't want, and it makes you a loose end." "I can pay you," she lied. "When we get to Fort Fetterman." Wyatt laughed, a harsh, dry sound. "Arthur Gentry owes the Union Pacific Railroad $4,000. He owes a gambling hall in Omaha another $1,000. And he owes me a brother." Susanna's breath hitched. "His brother?" "My brother," Wyatt corrected, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Gentry shot him in the back over a poker game in Cheyenne 3 weeks ago." Susanna stepped back, dropping the canteen. It hit the dirt with a dull thud. She was standing in front of a bounty hunter, no, a revenger. And she was the wife of the man he intended to kill. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I swear." Wyatt stared at her. He saw the genuine terror in her green eyes. He saw the grit of a woman who had survived a night alone in the Badlands. He needed to move fast. Gentry was gaining ground, but leaving her here was murder. Plain and simple, and Wyatt Coleman had killed many men, but he had never killed a woman, directly or indirectly. Besides, Gentry might not stop for a lawman. He might not stop for a bounty hunter. But he might stop if he saw his wife with a gun to her head. Or maybe he wouldn't. Maybe she was just bait. Wyatt kicked his boot out of the stirrup and held down a gloved hand. "Grab on," he commanded. Susanna hesitated. "You want to kill him. He's a dead man walking, Mrs. Gentry. The only question is whether you want to live to see the sunset." She looked at the vast, empty desert. Then she looked at the hard, unforgiving lines of Wyatt's face. "You'll go with me now," he said. It wasn't an offer. It was a statement of fact. Susanna reached up and grasped his hand. His grip was iron hard as he swung her up behind him onto the horse's powerful hindquarters. "Hold on to the belt," he said. "And don't fall off. I won't stop twice." He spurred the horse, and they surged forward, chasing the dust of the man who had betrayed them both. The horse, a monstrous beast Wyatt called Judge, ate up the miles with a ground-eating trot that jarred Susanna's teeth. She clung to Wyatt's waist, the smell of tobacco, leather, and horse sweat filling her nose. It was an intimate proximity with a man she was terrified of, but the alternative was the vultures she saw circling in the high thermals. They rode in silence for hours. The sun beat down, relentless and cruel. Susanna's lips were cracked, her skin burning. Wyatt didn't offer her the canteen again until they stopped at a muddy creek bed around noon. He dismounted smoothly and watered the horse first. Only after the beast had drunk did he fill the canteen and hand it to her. "Drink," he said. Susanna drank, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. She watched him check the cinch on the saddle. He was efficient, moving with an economy of motion that spoke of a life lived outdoors. "Why did he do it?" she asked, her voice quiet. Wyatt didn't look up. "Why did he shoot my brother? Or why did he leave you?" "Both." Wyatt stood, dusting his hands on his chaps. "He shot Billy because Billy caught him cheating. He left you because you were slowing him down. A wagon moves faster with less weight. And if he thinks I'm tracking him, which he likely does by now, he knows speed is the only thing keeping a rope off his neck." "He never mentioned you," Susanna said. "He said we were going to Oregon to start a farm. He had seeds. He had a plow. Props," Wyatt spat. "Gentry is a grifter, ma'am. Always has been. The farm was a story to keep you quiet and moving. He's heading for the border, or maybe the gold fields in Montana where he can get lost." Susanna felt a wave of nausea. 3 years. 3 years of her life built on a foundation of lies. She remembered the nights she had mended his shirts, the meals she had cooked over buffalo chip fires, the dreams they had whispered about. All of it was a cover for a man running from a noose. "I hate him," she said. The realization surprised her. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was a cold, hard hatred. Wyatt looked at her then. Really looked at her. He saw the change in her eyes. The weeping willow was gone. Something harder was taking root. "Good," Wyatt said. "Hate keeps you warm at night. Hate keeps you moving." He remounted. "Let's go." "We lost an hour. Where are we going?" "There's a relay station at Crazy Woman Creek. He'll have to stop for fresh horses if he ditched the oxen. If not, he's pushing the team to death. Either way, we catch him there." They rode until the stars began to bleed through the twilight. The terrain grew rougher, the flat plains giving way to broken ravines and sandstone bluffs, the devil's backbone. Wyatt halted the horse in a small box canyon that offered shelter from the wind. "We camp here?" he said. Susanna slid off the horse, her legs numb and trembling. She nearly collapsed, but Wyatt caught her by the elbow, steadying her. His touch was firm, impersonal, yet lingering for a second longer than necessary. "Get some wood, scrub brush. Nothing green, smoke's too much," he ordered. Susanna bristled. "I am not your servant, Mr. Coleman." Wyatt turned, his silhouette looming against the stars. "No, you're not. You're a liability I picked up. I cook, I hunt, I watch the perimeter. You gather wood, unless you want to walk back to Ohio." She glared at him, but she turned and began gathering dry sagebrush. She knew he was right. In this world, you worked or you died. They ate a dinner of hardtack and dried venison jerky that tasted like shoe leather. The fire was small, kept in a pit to hide the light. "How do you know he's at Crazy Woman Creek?" Susanna asked, chewing the tough meat. I know how he thinks. He's a coward. Cowards like comfort. He won't camp in the open if he can help it. He'll want a roof and a bottle of whiskey to celebrate his escape. He has money? He has the money he stole from the railroad. And likely whatever he had hidden in that wagon that he didn't want you to know about. Susanna thought of the heavy iron box Arthur kept under the seat. He claimed it was tools. The toolbox, she whispered. What? He had a box. Said it was tools. He never let me touch it. Wyatt nodded slowly. Gold, maybe, or bonds. That settles it. He's heavy, but he's rich. He'll try to trade the wagon for a fast horse at the station. Wyatt took a bedroll from his saddle and unrolled it near the fire. He tossed a rough wool blanket at Susanna. Sleep. Where do you sleep? I don't sleep much, Wyatt said, leaning back against his saddle, his rifle across his lap. He tipped his hat over his eyes. Susanna wrapped herself in the scratchy blanket. The ground was hard, but exhaustion was a powerful sedative. She watched the fire die down, watching the rise and fall of Wyatt's chest. He was a killer. He had admitted it, but he had come back for her. Arthur, the husband, the provider, had left her. Wyatt, the stranger, the threat, had fed her. The world had turned upside down. Sometime in the deep dark of the night, Susanna woke up. The fire was dead. The silence was absolute. She looked over at Wyatt. He was gone. Panic seized her. Had he left her too? Was this a cruel game men played? Then she felt a hand clamp over her mouth. She thrashed, but a strong arm pinned her to the ground. Quiet, Wyatt's voice hissed in her ear. Don't make a sound. He slowly released her mouth, putting a finger to his lips. He pointed toward the ridge above the canyon. In the moonlight, Susanna saw the silhouettes. 3 of them, feathers in their hair, lances in their hands. Sioux scouts. They were being hunted, but not by Arthur. Wyatt leaned close, his lips brushing her ear, sending a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold. They found the horse's tracks, he whispered. We leave everything, the bedroll, the fire. We move on foot up the back scree. Now, Susanna nodded. Wyatt grabbed his rifle and his saddlebags. He slapped the horse's flank hard, sending Judge galloping out of the canyon entrance with a loud whinny. The scouts on the ridge turned, shrieking, and kicked their ponies into pursuit of the horse. Go, Wyatt said, grabbing Susanna's hand. They scrambled up the loose rock of the back slope, slipping and sliding. Susanna's breath tore at her throat. They didn't stop until they were high in the rocks, looking down at the empty canyon. She watched as the shadows of the warriors chased her husband's horse into the dark. You sacrificed your horse, she said, amazed. How will we catch Arthur now? Wyatt looked at her, his face grim in the moonlight. We walk. It's 20 miles to the station, and we have to get there before he leaves. I can't walk 20 miles in these boots, Susanna said, looking at her flimsy footwear. Wyatt looked down. He knelt and took a knife from his belt. For a second, she thought he was going to hurt her. Instead, he cut the long leather fringe from his chaps. Sit, he ordered. She sat. He wrapped the leather strips around her boots, binding the soles tight, creating a makeshift moccasin layer over the leather. His hands were rough but surprisingly gentle as he tied the knots. That'll hold for a day, he said, standing up. You're tougher than you look, Mrs. Gentry. Susanna, she corrected him. My name is Susanna. I don't want to be Mrs. Gentry anymore. Wyatt looked at her, a flicker of respect in his dark eyes. All right, Susanna, let's go get your husband. The walk was a descent into hell. The Wyoming terrain was not flat. It was a series of deceptive rises and treacherous gullies. By the time the sun was high the next day, Susanna's feet were bleeding inside the leather bindings. She didn't complain. She focused on the rhythm of Wyatt's boots ahead of her. Step, step, breathe. Wyatt carried the rifle and the heavy saddlebags. He stopped every hour to let her rest, scanning the horizon with a brass telescope. He's there, Wyatt said around 3 o'clock. Susanna pulled herself up to the ridge. In the valley below sat a cluster of rough-hewn log buildings, the Crazy Woman Creek relay station, a corral, a main house, and a barn. And there, parked haphazardly near the barn, was the Conestoga wagon with the distinctive blue stripe, Arthur's wagon. "He's still there," Susanna breathed. "Changing horses takes time if you're haggling," Wyatt said. He checked the load in his Winchester. "Stay here." "No," Susanna said. Wyatt turned. "This is going to get loud, Susanna." "Stay here. He is my husband," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "I need to look him in the eye. I need him to see I'm not dead." Wyatt studied her face. He saw the fire there, a dangerous fire. "If you get in my line of fire, I will shoot through you," Wyatt warned. "Understood." They moved down the slope, using the scrub oak for cover. They reached the back of the barn unnoticed. They could hear voices arguing inside. "Robbery, plain and simple," a voice shouted. "Arthur, price is the price, Mr. Moore." "Or Gentry. Whatever you signed," a gruff voice replied. "Likely the station master, a man known as One-Eyed Jack." "I don't have that kind of cash on hand," Arthur whined. "Then I take the contents of the box." Wyatt moved to the barn door. He signaled Susanna to stay behind the doorframe. He kicked the door open, the wood splintering against the wall. "The box stays closed," Wyatt announced, his voice booming. Inside the dusty barn, Arthur Gentry spun around, his hand dropping to the revolver at his waist. He was a handsome man, in a weak, soft way. His suit was dusty, his face pale. "Wyatt," Arthur gasped. I thought you were in Street Lewis." "I was," Wyatt said, walking slowly into the barn, the rifle leveled at Arthur's chest. "Then I heard about Billy, and I came west." The station master, a burly man with an eye patch, raised his hands. "This ain't my fight, mister." "Back away, Jack," Wyatt said, eyes glued to Arthur. "Now, Wyatt, let's be reasonable," Arthur stammered, backing up against the wagon wheel. "Billy, that was a misunderstanding. He drew on me." "Billy didn't carry a gun, Arthur. We both know that." "I have money," Arthur cried. "In the box. Take it. Take it all. Just let me ride out." "I don't want your money," Wyatt said. "I want to know one thing before I put you down. Where is she?" Arthur blinked, sweat dripping down his temple. "Who?" "Your wife." "Susanna." Arthur licked his lips. She died. Typhoid. Back in Nebraska. Sad business." From the shadows of the doorframe, Susanna stepped out. She was covered in dust, her hair a wild tangle, her dress torn. She looked like a vengeful spirit rising from the earth. Arthur's face went white. He looked as if he had seen a ghost. "Hello, Arthur," she said. Her voice was ice cold. "Sue?" Arthur whispered. "Sue, honey. I thought you were lost. I went back. I swear I went back. You left a note," she said, walking toward him. Wyatt didn't stop her. "You left me a mirror and a comb. To make myself pretty for the coyotes?" No, I was going to send help." Arthur was pleading now, looking from Wyatt's gun to Susanna's eyes. "You sold me for a seat on a stagecoach," she said. She stopped 3 feet from him. Arthur's eyes darted around. He saw the station master backing away. He saw the grim finality in Wyatt's stance. Desperation took over. In a blur of motion, Arthur lunged. Not at Wyatt, he knew he couldn't beat the gunman. He lunged at Susanna. He grabbed her, spinning her around, pulling his revolver and pressing the cold barrel to her temple. "Drop it, Coleman," Arthur screamed. "Drop it or I paint the barn with her." Wyatt froze. The rifle was aimed, but the shot was blocked by Susanna's head. "Let her go, Arthur," Wyatt said, his voice deadly calm. "You hide behind a woman, you die like a dog." "I'm leaving," Arthur shouted, dragging Susanna backward toward the rear exit. "Get the horses, Jack. Get them now." Susanna felt the metal against her skin. She smelled the fear and stale whiskey on Arthur. She felt his heart hammering against her back. She looked at Wyatt. He was staring at her, his eyes locking onto hers. He gave a microscopic nod. "Trust me." Susanna didn't wait. She stomped her heel down, driving it into Arthur's instep with all the force she had left. Arthur howled, his grip loosening for a fraction of a second. Susanna dropped her weight, slumping toward the floor. Arthur's head was exposed. Crack. The sound of the Winchester was deafening in the enclosed space. Arthur was thrown backward as if kicked by a mule. He hit the dirt floor, the gun flying from his hand. Susanna scrambled away, coughing in the gun smoke. Wyatt walked over to where Arthur lay. The man was gasping, a hand pressed to his shoulder. Wyatt had shot to wound, not to kill. Not yet. Wyatt kicked Arthur's hand away from the wound. He looked down at the man who had ruined 2 lives. "You're lucky," Wyatt said. "She's watching." Wyatt looked at Susanna. She was trembling, sitting in the straw. He reached out a hand. "You all right?" She took his hand. "I am now." Wyatt turned back to Arthur. "Get up. You're going to Laramie, to stand trial for Billy, and for attempted murder of your wife. Laramie is a week away." Arthur groaned. "I'm bleeding." "Then you better hope you clot fast," Wyatt said. He looked at the station master. "Jack, we need fresh horses. And a rope." The trail to Laramie was a punishing stretch of alkali dust and relentless sun. They moved slowly. They had traded Arthur's heavy Conestoga wagon at the relay station for 3 decent saddle horses and a pack mule, much to the chagrin of One-Eyed Jack, who knew stolen goods when he saw them but wasn't willing to argue with Wyatt's Winchester. Arthur Gentry rode in the middle, his hands bound to the saddle horn, his shoulder bandaged tightly. The wound had taken the fight out of him, replacing it with a pathetic, whining commentary on the injustice of his situation. "My arm is rotting off, Coleman," Arthur moaned on the 3rd day, swaying in the saddle. "You can't just let a man gangrene out here. It ain't Christian." Wyatt, riding point, didn't turn his head. "Billy didn't get a chance to rot, Arthur. He just bled out on a sawdust floor." "You'll make Laramie." Susanna rode drag, trailing behind the pack mule. She wore trousers now, cinched tight with a belt Jack had lent her, and a calico shirt that was too big. The sun had burnished her skin to a deep bronze, and her hands were calloused from the reins. She watched the backs of the 2 men, the husband who had discarded her, and the gunmen who had saved her. The dynamic had shifted tectonically. She was no longer baggage. She was part of the unit holding Arthur prisoner. She watered the horses. She gathered buffalo chips for the fire. And she kept a wary eye on the horizon while Wyatt slept his scant 4 hours a night. That night, they camped near a dried-up creek bed that offered a trickle of muddy water. After securing Arthur to a cottonwood tree far enough away so they didn't have to smell his fear sweat, Wyatt hauled the heavy iron toolbox off the pack mule. It hit the ground with a monolithic thud. "He was willing to let you die for this," Wyatt said, staring at the padlocked lid. "Let's see what your life was worth to him." Wyatt fired a single shot at the padlock. It shattered. He kicked open the lid. Susanna gasped. It wasn't tools. It wasn't even just gold coin, though there were several heavy canvas sacks of double eagles nestled in the corners. The bulk of the box was filled with thick sheaves of paper, bound with twine, ornate engravings, official seals. Wyatt picked up a stack, his face hardening into stone. "What are they?" Susanna asked, moving closer to the firelight. "Railroad bonds," Wyatt said, his voice flat. "Union Pacific bearer bonds. Unregistered. Good as cash. Anywhere from San Francisco to New York." He did a quick mental tally, thumbing through the stacks. He looked up at Susanna, the firelight dancing in his dark eyes. "There's near $50,000 here, Susanna." The number staggered her. It was unimaginable wealth. Enough to buy land, build a town, or disappear forever. "He stole $50,000 from the railroad?" she whispered. "Arthur couldn't plan a theft like that. He's a card cheat, a petty swindler." "You're right," Wyatt said, tossing the bonds back into the box as if they were venomous snakes. "He didn't steal these. Not originally. Wyatt stood and walked over to where Arthur was slumped against the tree, feigning sleep. Wyatt kicked the sole of Arthur's boot hard. Arthur yelped awake. "What? What is it? Where did you get the bonds, Arthur?" Wyatt demanded. "And don't lie to me. I know the Union Pacific payroll heist outside of Rock Springs 2 months ago. That wasn't a one-man job. That was the Kearney gang." Arthur's face, already pale from blood loss, turned a sickly gray. He began to stammer, his eyes wide in the moonlight. I won them. In a game. A high-stakes game in Cheyenne. You won 50,000 in stolen bonds in a poker game?" Wyatt leaned in close, his voice a terrifying whisper. "You're lying. You were the inside man, weren't you? You worked the freight office in Omaha before you headed west. You tipped them off." Arthur broke. He began to sob, great, racking shudders. They were supposed to just take the cash, no shooting. But they killed the guards. "Kearney is crazy, Wyatt. He's mad dog crazy. And you ran off with the loot instead of taking your cut," Wyatt deduced, disgust dripping from his words. "You double-crossed Red Kearney." Susanna felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. Red Kearney. Even back east, the newspapers carried stories of the Kearney gang. They didn't just rob. They slaughtered. "He didn't just leave me behind because I was slow," Susanna realized aloud. Her voice was hollow. "He left me because he knew they were coming." Arthur looked at her, his eyes pleading. "Sue, I had to move fast. They track like wolves. If they caught us with the wagon, I thought if I was alone, I could move faster, get to the coast. You used me as bait," she said. The realization didn't hurt anymore. It just calcified the hatred in her heart. "You hoped they'd find the wagon, find me, and spend time questioning me while you got away." Arthur didn't deny it. He just hung his head. Wyatt grabbed Arthur by the shirt front and slammed him back against the tree trunk. "You aren't just a murderer, Gentry. You're a plague." Wyatt turned to Susanna. "The game has changed. We aren't just taking him to trial anymore. We're running for our lives." "Kearney is coming?" Susanna asked. "If Arthur has the bonds, Kearney is behind us, and he won't stop for anything. He'd burn down the whole territory to get this box back." Wyatt looked out into the oppressive darkness. "Laramie is too far. We need a place to defend ourselves. We need high ground." The urgency of their travel shifted from a forced march to a desperate flight. Wyatt pushed the pace, riding hard from dawn till dusk, constantly doubling back to check their trail, dusting their tracks with brush where he could. Tension crackled between them. The vast emptiness of the Wyoming landscape no longer felt indifferent. It felt hostile, harboring unseen eyes behind every ridge. Susanna found herself watching Wyatt more closely. She watched how he handled the Winchester, how his eyes constantly scanned the horizon, how he seemed to know the land as if he'd personally carved it. He was a hard man. Violence was his trade, yet he treated her with a rigid, protective code. On the second day after opening the box, they stopped at a small, alkaline watering hole known as Bitter Springs. The horses were blown, their sides heaving with sweat. Wyatt dismounted, handing his reins to Susanna. "Water judge first. Don't let Arthur near the water until I say so." He walked up a small rise, pulling his brass telescope from his saddlebag to scan their back trail. Susanna led the horses to the murky water. Arthur, tied to his saddle, leaned down, trying to lap at the water like a dog. "Wait," Susanna ordered, pulling his horse's head up. "I'm dying of thirst, woman." Arthur spat, his facade of sorrow gone, replaced by venom. "You think you're tough now, don't you? Riding with a killer. You think he cares about you? He's just waiting to turn me in for the bounty and leave you at the next brothel." Susanna looked at him. He was filthy, pathetic, and evil. "He came back for me, Arthur. You didn't." Up on the ridge, Wyatt froze. Through the glass, miles back, he saw a dust cloud. It wasn't the wind. It was moving too purposefully. 5 riders, moving fast. He snapped the telescope shut. "They're here." He scrambled down the slope. "Mount up. Now." Susanna didn't argue. She swung into the saddle. Wyatt grabbed the pack mule's lead rope. "Which way?" Susanna asked. "West, toward the granite ridge. We can't outrun them on the flats with the mule. We have to get into the rocks." They hadn't gone a mile when the first shot cracked the air. The sound was thin and distant, but the bullet kicked up dirt fast to Susanna's left. "Ride!" Wyatt yelled, slapping the rump of Susanna's horse. They broke into a full gallop, the horses straining. The ground grew rougher, littered with boulders and treacherous shale slides. Behind them, the pursuers were closing the gap. Their horses were fresh. Another shot whined past, closer this time. Arthur screamed as his horse stumbled on a loose rock, nearly unseating him. "They're gaining!" Susanna yelled, looking back. She could see them now, 5 men in long dusters, riding hard. The lead man wore a faded red sash tied around his hat. "Red Kearney, keep going for that notch in the cliffs." Wyatt pointed to a narrow defile in the looming granite wall ahead. They hit the base of the slope, the horses scrabbling for purchase. The pack mule, laden with the gold and bonds, was slowing them down terribly. "Cut the mule loose," Arthur shouted. "Let them have it." "No," Wyatt roared. He knew Kearney wouldn't stop just because he got the money. He left no witnesses. They were 50 yards from the pass when a bullet struck the pack mule. The poor beast screamed and collapsed, spilling the iron box onto the rocky ground. Wyatt pulled Judge to a sliding halt, leaping from the saddle, his Winchester already shouldered. "Get Arthur into the rocks," Wyatt commanded Susanna. "Cover him." Wyatt took a knee behind the dead mule, using it as cover. He began to fire, working the lever action of the rifle with blinding speed. Crack, crack, crack. He dropped the lead rider's horse. The man Kearney rolled clear, coming up firing with 2 revolvers. Susanna dragged Arthur's horse into the shelter of the narrow pass. She dismounted and yanked Arthur from the saddle, shoving him down behind a large boulder. "Stay down," she hissed. She looked back. Wyatt was pinned down. 3 of the remaining riders had dismounted and were flanking him, moving through the sagebrush, pouring fire onto his position. Bullets sparked off the iron box and thudded into the mule's carcass. Wyatt was holding them off, but he was outgunned. One rider was circling wide to the left, getting an angle on Wyatt's exposed flank. Wyatt was focused on Kearney in the center and didn't see him. Susanna saw the flanking rider raise his rifle, aiming at Wyatt's back. Time seemed to slow down. She remembered the Nebraska plains, the silence, the feeling of being utterly disposable. She remembered Wyatt's hand reaching down to her. She didn't think. She reached into Wyatt's saddle holster on Judge, which was ground-tied next to her, and pulled out his heavy Colt Peacemaker. It took both hands to hold it steady. She rested her forearms on the boulder, aiming at the man flanking Wyatt. She cocked the hammer. The sound was loud in her ears. She took a breath, squeezed her eyes shut for half a second, opened them, and pulled the trigger. The gun bucked violently in her hands, the boom deafening. She missed the rider, but the bullet struck the rock inches from his face, showering him with stone fragments. He yelled, dropping his rifle and clutching his eyes, retreating back behind cover. Wyatt heard the shot from behind him. He glanced back, seeing Susanna with the smoking gun. A grim look of pride crossed his face. "Good girl," he muttered. The momentary distraction was enough. Wyatt stood up, exposing himself to fire, and laid down a suppressing barrage that forced Kearney and his men to keep their heads down. "Move," Wyatt yelled, sprinting backward toward the pass, grabbing the iron box by one handle and dragging it with colossal effort over the rough ground. He made it into the defile, gasping for air. "They're regrouping," Wyatt said, reloading his Winchester. "We bought maybe 10 minutes. He looked at Susanna. Her face was smudged with gunpowder, her eyes wide with the shock of what she had done. "You all right?" he asked gently. She nodded, her hands trembling uncontrollably as she tried to lower the hammer of the Colt. Wyatt reached over, his large hand covering hers, and carefully lowered the hammer for her. "You saved my life, Susanna." She looked at him, the adrenaline crashing. "They're going to kill us, aren't they?" "Not today," Wyatt said. He looked up the narrow canyon. It was a dead end, boxing into a high, sheer cliff face. But there was an old, tumble-down prospector's stone hut built against the back wall. "We make our stand there," Wyatt said. "Sentinel Butte. It's defensible, only one way in." "It's a trap," Arthur whimpered from the ground. "We'll die in there." Wyatt hauled Arthur to his feet. "Then we die fighting, which is more than you deserve." The cabin was little more than 3 stone walls and a partial roof made of rotting timbers and sod. It smelled of ancient wood smoke and rat droppings, but it was built against solid granite, and the single doorway faced the narrow, choke-point approach of the canyon. They spent the last hour of daylight fortifying it. Wyatt moved rocks to build up a breastwork in front of the door. They brought the horses into the deepest part of the canyon fold behind the cabin, hoping they'd be sheltered from stray bullets. The iron box sat in the middle of the dirt floor, a grim centerpiece. As dusk bled into night, a heavy silence fell over the canyon. The wind died down. The only sound was Arthur's ragged breathing. His wound was infected, fever setting in. He lay in the corner, muttering deliriously about Omaha and roulette wheels. Wyatt sat by the doorway, rifle across his knees, watching the moonlit approach. Susanna sat beside him, the Colt pistol now tucked into her belt. "They won't attack at night," Wyatt said quietly. "Kearney likes to see what he's shooting at. They'll wait for dawn." "How many are left?" Susanna asked. "Kearney and 3 others. 4 against 2. 2.5, she said, touching the gun at her waist. Wyatt chuckled softly. It was a warm sound in the cold night. 2.5. I'll take those odds. He looked at her in the dim light. The soft settler's wife from Ohio was gone. In her place was a woman forged by the high desert, a woman who could face down death without flinching. She was magnificent. "Susanna," Wyatt said, his voice rough, "if they breach the wall, if I go down, don't let them take you. You understand?" She knew what he meant. Kearney's reputation with women was worse than his reputation with banks. "I understand," she said steadily. He reached out and took her hand. His palm was rough, calloused from years of gun handling and riding. He rubbed his thumb over her knuckles. "I'm sorry I dragged you into this," he said. "You didn't drag me, Wyatt. You picked me up." She squeezed his hand. "Whatever happens tomorrow, thank you for not leaving me behind." He looked at her, his intense, predatory eyes softening. He leaned in slowly. She didn't pull away. He kissed her. It wasn't a delicate, romantic kiss. It was desperate, tasting of dust and danger, and a longing that had been building for miles. She kissed him back, pouring all her fear and newfound strength into it. They broke apart slowly. "Get some sleep," Wyatt whispered. "I'll take first watch." She didn't sleep, but she rested her head on his shoulder, listening to the steady beat of his heart against the encroaching darkness. Dawn broke with a violent streak of crimson across the eastern sky. The attack began with a stick of dynamite tossed near the canyon entrance, the explosion deafening in the confined space, showering them with dirt and rock dust. Then came the lead. Bullets hammered the stone walls of the cabin, chipping away at the mortar, thudding into the rotting roof beams. Wyatt was instantly at the barricade, firing calmly, methodically. He didn't waste shots. Every time he pulled the trigger, a yelp or a curse echoed from down the canyon. Susanna was beside him, reloading his second revolver, handing it to him when his Winchester ran dry, taking the rifle to reload it herself. They worked as a seamless team. "They're moving up," Wyatt yelled over the din. "2 on the left side, behind the scree slope." A bullet zinged through a gap in the stones, tearing the sleeve of Susanna's shirt, grazing her arm. She barely flinched, shoving a fresh magazine into the rifle. In the corner, Arthur was screaming, terrified by the noise, thrashing in his fever. "Stop it! Stop it! I'll give you the money!" Arthur yelled, delirious. He stood up, swaying, clutching his wounded shoulder. He looked at the iron box, then at the doorway where bullets were flying. "Arthur, get down!" Susanna screamed at him. "No, no more. I'm ending this." Arthur grabbed one of the heavy sacks of gold coins from the open box. He stumbled toward the doorway, shoving past Susanna. "Gentry, you fool, get back!" Wyatt roared, trying to grab him, but he had to duck as a volley of fire hammered the doorway. Arthur stumbled out into the open, into the kill zone in front of the cabin, holding the sack of gold high in his good hand like a white flag. "Kearney, Red, it's me, Arthur," he screamed into the dawn light. "I have the gold. I have the bonds. Don't shoot. Let's make a deal." The firing stopped for a heartbeat. The silence was louder than the guns. Arthur stood there, swaying, a pathetic figure in a torn suit, offering up his soul for another day of life. From down the canyon, a voice boomed out, harsh and laughing. "Arthur Gentry. You slippery little rat." It was Kearney. "You think I want to deal with a man who stole from me? Red, please. I have it all right here." Arthur stepped forward. A single shot rang out from the rocks below. It wasn't a warning shot. It caught Arthur square in the center of his chest. He dropped the gold sack. He looked back at the cabin, his eyes wide with final, terrible surprise. He looked at Susanna, his lips moving silently, and then he collapsed face first into the dirt. Arthur Gentry's long run of luck had finally run dry. Inside the cabin, Susanna stared at her dead husband. She felt no sorrow, only a grim finality. "He bought them a clear shot," Wyatt spat, chambering a fresh round. He looked at Susanna. "It's just us now. Get ready." They're coming over the wall. The silence following Arthur's death was shattered by a rebel yell. Red Kearney and his remaining 2 men broke cover, charging up the slope. They knew Wyatt was alone, or thought he was. "They're rushing us," Wyatt shouted, kicking the heavy iron box to block the door. "Keep low." Susanna dropped behind the barricade, her heart hammering like a trapped bird. She leveled the Winchester over the box as the first bandit made the threshold. Wyatt's revolver barked twice, dropping the man, but the momentum carried Kearney and the scar-faced knife fighter, Juarez, right into the room. Kearney slammed into Wyatt, a tangle of dust and violence, crashing into the wall. Wyatt's gun skittered away into the corner. Juarez vaulted in behind them, a long Bowie knife glinting. He saw Wyatt occupied and turned his eyes on Susanna. He grinned, revealing a mouthful of gold teeth. "Pretty thing," Juarez hissed. "I'll make this slow." Susanna backed up until her shoulders hit the rough stone wall. She tried to bring the rifle to bear, but Juarez swatted it aside with a brutal backhand. He lunged. Susanna didn't scream. Panic is death. She dropped to the ground, grabbing a handful of loose dirt and cold ash from the fire pit. As Juarez grabbed for her hair, she threw the grit into his eyes. Juarez howled, blinded, slashing wildly with the knife. Susanna scrambled on her hands and knees toward the corner where the heavy Colt Peacemaker had fallen. Her fingers brushed the cold steel. She rolled onto her back, gripping the heavy pistol with both hands. Juarez was wiping his eyes, blinking tears away. He saw her and raised the knife to end it. Click. She cocked the hammer. "Go to hell," she whispered. She pulled the trigger. The bullet caught Juarez under the chin, snapping his head back and dropping him instantly. Across the room, the fight was desperate. Kearney had Wyatt pinned against the wall, thumbs digging into his windpipe. Wyatt's face was turning purple, his vision tunneling. He reached blindly, his hand finding the neck of a whiskey bottle. With the last of his strength, he smashed it against the stone and drove the jagged glass into Kearney's side. Kearney screamed, his grip loosening. Wyatt gasped for air and drove a right hook into Kearney's jaw. The bandit stumbled back, tripping over Arthur's body in the doorway and landing hard in the dirt outside. He scrambled to his feet, clutching his bleeding side, and raised his revolver. Wyatt stood in the doorway, heaving for breath, his hands empty. "End of the line. Cowboy," Kearney sneered. Crack. The shot didn't come from Wyatt. Kearney looked down at the red blossom spreading on his chest, then up, bewildered. Behind Wyatt, Susanna stood in the shadows, smoke curling from the barrel of the Colt. Kearney fell to his knees. He looked at the gold scattered in the dirt next to Arthur, then at the vast Wyoming sky. He collapsed face forward into the dust, dead. Silence returned to Sentinel Butte. This time, it was permanent. Wyatt slumped against the doorframe, sliding down until he sat on the ground. He looked at Susanna. She was still holding the gun, her chest heaving, staring at the bodies. "You got him," Wyatt rasped. Susanna slowly lowered the gun. She looked at the carnage, Juarez inside, Kearney outside, and Arthur lying amidst the ruin he had caused. She walked over to Wyatt. She didn't faint. She didn't cry. She sat down beside him and rested her head on his shoulder. "Is it over?" she asked. Wyatt wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close against the settling dust. "Yeah," he said softly. "It's over. They buried the dead in the unforgiving earth." Susanna insisted Arthur lie apart from the bandits. Standing over his grave, she felt no lingering grief, only a grim sense of release. "Goodbye, Arthur," she whispered into the wind. "I hope you find the peace you never gave me." That night, the firelight danced on the contents of the open iron box. "A king's ransom," Wyatt murmured, pouring coffee. 50,000 in railroad bonds, 5,000 in gold. Susanna stared at the wealth. "It's blood money. Arthur and those men died for it. If we keep the bonds, the Pinkertons will hunt us forever. We'd be prisoners to it." Wyatt nodded slowly. "The bonds are numbered, but the gold is untraceable. 5,000 is a clean start." Susanna reached into the box, grabbing a thick stack of bonds. She held them over the flames. "What are you doing?" "I'm buying our freedom," she said, dropping the paper into the fire. Wyatt watched them curl into black ash, a faint smile touching his lips. He picked up another stack and tossed it in. Together, they fed the fortune to the flames, burning the greed, the betrayal, and the past until only the heavy canvas sacks of gold coins remained. "So, what now, Wyatt?" Susanna asked, the firelight illuminating her sharpened, beautiful features. He stood and offered his hand. "I know a valley in Montana, near the Yellowstone. Good water, good grass. Not many people." Susanna took his hand, anchoring herself. "Do they need horses in Montana?" "They always need horses," Wyatt said, pulling her close. "And strong women." The tension of survival finally broke. He kissed her, a promise sealed in dust and starlight. "You go with me now?" he asked, echoing the words he had spoken when he saved her life. "I go with you," she replied steadily. "But I ride my own horse." Wyatt laughed, a deep, genuine sound. 2 days later, they rode out of Laramie, legal bounties collected and supplies packed. On the final ridge, Susanna paused to look south one last time. The woman Arthur Gentry had left to die was gone. In her place was Susanna Coleman, forged in fire and carrying gold. She turned her horse north toward the snow-capped mountains and never looked back. And so, Susanna Gentry learned that sometimes, being left behind is the only way to find out where you're truly meant to go. She found not just survival, but a strength she never knew she possessed, and a love forged in the fires of the Wyoming Badlands. It's a reminder that when the world abandons you, you have two choices: give up or saddle up. Susanna saddled up. Thank you for listening to this tale of betrayal, revenge, and redemption in the Wild West. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more gritty, original tales from the frontier, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to share this video with your friends who love a good Western, and subscribe so you never miss a new episode. What would you have done with the bonds? Burned them or cashed them? Let me know in the comments below. Ride safe, everyone.